Picture this. A hulking president corners the Federal Reserve chairman in a private room, pins him against the wall with a meaty hand, and bellows threats right in his face. The air thick with tension, the prez demanding lower interest rates to pump up his big spending plans, screaming that real Americans are suffering, while this egghead plays games with the economy. But hold on, this isn't Donald Trump in some 2026 White House showdown. No, we're talking about Lyndon B. Johnson back in 1965, roughing up William McChesney Martin at his Texas ranch over Vietnam funding and social programs. Yet that old-timey presidential arm-twisting, it casts a long, wacky shadow over today's cartoonish clash, where DOJ subpoenas and criminal probes stand in for physical shoves. If you're hooked on the gritty tales where finance clashes with raw power, subscribe to the Wall Street Channel, a financial channel, and hit that bell. You won't miss the next episode, dissecting how the elite battle it out, while markets and everyday folks hang in the balance. Now, let's dive deeper into January 2026, where the Trump-Powell feud has ballooned into full-blown comic book villainy. On January 11th, Jerome Powell, that steadfast Fed chair with a no-nonsense gaze, releases a rare video statement straight from the Fed's website. He discloses that on January 9th, the Department of Justice, under a Trump appointee, hit the Fed with grand jury subpoenas, dangling criminal charges over his June 2025 congressional testimony on the $2.5 billion headquarters renovation boondoggle. Imagine Powell, tie straight as a ruler, coolly dubbing it a sham, flimsy excuses like perjury accusations, hiding the true motive, strong-arming rate cuts to rev Trump's economic engine. He frames it as payback for anchoring rates to solid data, not presidential whims. The investigation, sneakily kicked off in November 2025 by U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, a die-hard Trump ally, without tipping off higher-ups at DOJ. Mundane tidbit. Pirro's team pored over expense logs and hearing transcripts, hunting for fibs on mundane stuff like escalated costs for new wiring and ergonomic chairs, details as thrilling as filing taxes, but weaponized if you're bucking the boss. Markets? They stage a mini meltdown at dawn. On January 12th, stocks creak open in the red, with the Dow tumbling about 488 points early on, roughly 1%, as traders sweat a Fed turned political puppet. Long-term Treasury yields nudge higher, betting on future rate hikes to fend off any coerced easing. But by the closing bell, it's a heroic comeback. The S&P 500 climbs 0.2% to a fresh record close at 6,963.74. The Dow recovers to gain 86 points and end at 49,590.20, another all-time high, and the Nasdaq edges up 0.3%. Tech darlings fuel the rally, though specifics on Nvidia show a modest uptick to close at 184.94 after opening at 183.22 amid broader AI buzz. Walmart, it leaps 3% on robust holiday earnings reports. Gold, it vaults to a record intraday high of $4,629.94 per ounce, before settling around $4,616, up about 0.65% from the prior close, as investors hoard the yellow stuff like squirrels prepping for winter. The dollar, the index slips 0.27% to close at 98.86, weakening against the euro by 0.29%, but actually firming 0.15% versus the yen, contrary to some knee-jerk fears. Why the nonchalant vibe? Traders wager on Powell's resilience, bolstered by a star-studded backup chorus. Former Fed chairs Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen, and international heavyweights from the ECB and Bank of England drop joint declarations, blasting it as emerging market shenanigans that could inflate expectations and dent U.S. prestige. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly dials Trump on January 11, venting that it's a needless sideshow, muddying economic priorities. Bipartisan fury erupts like popcorn in a microwave. Senate Republicans Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski decry it as a colossal blunder and bullying, pledging to halt all Fed nominations until it's sorted. Tillis blasts out a tweet vowing no rubber stamp for Trump's next chair nominee, with Powell's slot up May 15. Murkowski demands a Hill inquiry into DOJ antics. House Speaker Mike Johnson hedges, muttering "let the chips fall," but concedes the basis had better hold water. Democrats rage about abuse of power, with Chuck Schumer likening Trump to autocrats who muzzle independent bodies. Mundane nugget: Johnson's staff logs a surge in constituent emails that week, many from small-town bankers fretting over loan rates if Fed faith falters. On X, it's a digital Donnybrook. Populists whoop at last, scrutiny for the Fed's plush digs, churning memes of Powell lounging in a gold-plated office. Economists fire back with apocalyptic threats, forecasting decades of turmoil akin to the 1970s. Imagine a viral post from a Midwestern corn grower. My dad went bust in '75 when rates flipped wild. Don't let DC drama repeat it. Trump's crew denies puppeteering, with press sec Caroline Leavitt asserting his free speech right to critique. But detractors caricature him as a suit-clad thug, wielding justice like a comic book mallet. Cut to January 21. Supreme Court oral arguments on Trump's push to boot Fed Governor Lisa Cook for supposed mortgage fibs, claiming a primary residence for a sweeter rate. Win that, and it's a blueprint for dumping Powell prematurely. Cook's suit simmers, but a verdict could gift Trump board overhaul powers. Powell? He signals he'll hang tough as a governor until 2028, a pesky fly in the ointment. Economic scene: December payrolls crawl at plus 50,000, ISM services perks to 54.4, inflation dips to 2.7%, stats hollering steady as she goes, now tainted by political slapstick. Pundits forecast the January 28 FOMC holds pat to dodge seeming spineless, but volatility jitters abound. One floor trader jokes, it's like wagering on a soap opera, where the plot twists daily. This 2026 farce? Merely the newest doodle in a sketchbook of presidential interference dating back centuries. Rewind to the 1830s with Andrew Jackson, that mop-topped rabble-rouser, sporting dual wounds like badges, launching a crusade against the Second Bank of the United States. He brands it a greedy hydra, tentacles choking the common folk. In 1832, he axes its recharter with bombastic flair. Shadowy money men dictating our fate? Balderdash. Then the sly maneuver. He siphons federal funds during congressional recess, canning 2 treasury heads until a compliant one complies. Cash flows to pet banks, Powell's outfits that dole loans like candy at a parade. Bank chief Nicholas Biddle strikes back, squeezing credit to spotlight his institution's role. But it boomerangs, amplifying Jackson's tyranny claims. Charter croaks in 1836. Jackson preens like a peacock. Brief euphoria. National debt zeroes out in 1835. Land grabs explode like fireworks. Mundane morsel. Kentucky homesteaders swap tall tales over moonshine about flipping barren acres for fortunes, scribbling promissory notes on napkins. But the crash? Epic pie fight. Lacking a central sheriff, pet banks run amok, minting dubious notes and funding every harebrained scheme. Balloon deflates in 1837. The panic wallops like a pratfall. Banks fold like cheap suits. Credit dries up. Joblessness hits 25% in urban hives. New York flower riots shatter storefronts. Families squat in derelict warehouses. A Philadelphia seamstress's ledger laments, sewing rags for scraps. Slump slogs to 1843, erasing nest eggs. A Boston clerk pawns his watch for bread. Kids foraging alleys for scraps. Jackson's grudge? It spawns a monetary madhouse for generations. No emergency backstop means scares every cycle, like recurring clown cars. Libertarians might applaud the cartel crusher, but the mayhem? A goofy testament that vendettas for ballots brew financial folly. Jackson's rage peaks with his bark. The bank's out to slay me, but I'll slay it. And he does, but entombs prosperity alongside. Over the top, eh? Leap to 1965. Lyndon Johnson, that drawling colossus from the Lone Star State, juggling guns and butter, Vietnam ammo heaps, plus Great Society treats like Medicaid and school lunches. Prices percolate like forgotten coffee. Fed Chair William McChesney Martin, the prim financier, bumps the discount rate 0.5%, first in ages, to chill the pot. LBJ detonates, hauls Martin to his ranch for a powwow. But it's a Wild West standoff. Johnson, towering post-op, looms over pint-sized Martin, slams him wallward, finger pokes, and thunders. Troops bleed in Nam, and Martin fiddles. Mundane with, ranch den reeks of stale smokes and brisket scraps, Johnson's hounds yapping as he gripes about stabbing his vulnerable flank. Martin, perspiring yet poised, invokes statute. Our call, end of. LBJ retreats, but frostbite sets in. They smile for cameras, but rapport's rubble. Fallout, Fed flinches from bolder squeezes, dreading oval ire. Inflation sneaks from 1 to 2% early 60s to 4.5% by 1968, cresting 5.9% in 1969. Regular Joe's smart. A Milwaukee mechanic forgoes hubcaps as tires inflate 15%. Butter hits $1 a pound, prompting backyard gardens. Imagine a Seattle clerk's notebook. Groceries gobble the paycheck. Switch to oatmeal mornings. Johnson's muscle? It sows inflation vines that strangle the 70s, morphing a drip into a deluge. And bonus, LBJ meddles more, floods markets with surplus grain to pin prices, harangues auto bosses at wee hours for rebates. Economy marionette? Like a tune where wires snag, toppling the set. Johnson's pettiness shines in dimming White House bulbs to conserve, really veiling bill hikes from his schemes. Ego overload. 1972 rolls in. Richard Nixon, the jowly schemer with perpetual stubble, hungers for re-election like a bear for honey. He pesters Fed Chair Arthur Burns, his hand-picked Prof-Powell with non-stop White House confabs and rustic retreats. Recordings rat him out. Arthur, rev the motor, will swallow price pops, not pink slips. Burns, inflation so at heart, folds like origami. Rates low, cash gushes. GDP gallops 7.7%. Nixon steamrolls McGovern. Confetti time. But payback. Inflation erupts 11% by 1974. Hatching stagflation. Costs cosmic. Expansion zilch. Layoffs legion. Mundane bite. Grocery carts lighten as milk leaps 30%. A Philly baker hikes loaves twice weekly. Stats blame 8% surplus surge on Nixon's nudge. Kinships crack. An Atlanta teacher moonlights, home auctioned. Her plea to Nixon, vowed vigor, delivered vacuum. Nixon's plotting? Brands burns a toady, phrase Fedora, and dooms the era to doldrums. Libertarians snicker at Fed as Nixon's vote vault. But the woe? A somber satire. Nixon's pre-ballot wage lock, band-aid on a chainsaw cut, costs cannonball after polls, like exploding gag gifts. 1980s curtain. Paul Volcker, cigar-puffing behemoth with rumble voice, blitzes Nixon's price phantom with shock and awe. Rates soar beyond 19% in 1981. Downturn devours, jobless peaks 10.8%, mills mothball like relics. Ronald Reagan, beaming actor pres, publicly pats Volcker, sidestepping flak as ranchers parade tractors in protest. But hush hush, nearing 1984 votes, aide James Baker bushwhacks Volcker in library ambush. Reagan mute spectator. Boss decrees no upticks till ballots. Volcker's gobsmacked, deems it jaw-dropping trespass. No spikes slated, so course steady, but the murmur apes Nixon's mischief. Volcker softens slightly, boom blossoms, Reagan romps. Scars persist. 80s ag-apocalypse swallows 300,000 holdings, lenders topple. Mundane scene. Kansas sales hawk combines cheap. Klan loads wagons pre-sunup. Tots hugging teddies as locals whisper. Minnesota tallies 600 flops in 1987, halving to 230.88, but offings up 20%, splits skyrocket in ghost hamlets. Imagine an Oklahoma rancher's widow, hikes hammered the herd, sorrows sank him. Reagan's covert coax upholds Fed veneer, but unmasks fragility. Volcker's metal averts abyss. Volcker's squeeze sparks direst unemployment since Dust Bowl, but slays the dragon. Heroes bruise for the win. US buffoonery echoes worldwide whimsy. Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdogan, whiskered autocrat with paranoia flair, touts bonkers belief high rates birth inflation. He shreds bag statutes, cans 3 govs 2019 to 2021 for hike heresy amid cost carnage. Payoff? Prices pole vault 63% in 2022. Lira limps, funds flee. Mundane Ankara mums halve recipes as eggs triple, vendor sighs over empty shelves. Erdogan U-turns 2023 for sane spikes, but wreckage? Perpetual penury, shadow swaps the bucks. Argentina 2010, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, chic firebrand in designer duds, loots reserves for IOUs, ejects Governor Martin Redrado by fiat, law be damned. Freedom fizzles, inflation vaults 50%, debacles recur. Mundane, Patagonia herders barter wool for basics as pesos plummet. Spots like Hungary, India, Brazil mimic the mayhem, Wobbly monies, loan sharks, facts yell, free banks fetch tame inflation, smooth sails, versus Germany's ironclad or Canada's cocooned, prices predictable as sunrise. US wobbling, Powell's shaky setup script nails it, teetering from titan to travesty. Erdogan's rate foes, he duels and doles hyperinflation trophies. Farce supreme. These skirmishes scar savagely, not just suits. Jackson's scrap, 1837 panic, porpoise hordes. A Virginia planter forfeits estate, kin scatters. Nixon's nag, 70s stagflation saps stashes. Cleveland clerk pawns ring for rent, offspring shoeless. Volcker's volley, Reagan ribbed. Pastures perish, villages vaporize. Iowa's 687 wrecks wane to 230.88, yet ripples remain. Therapy waits lengthen, bars brim with blues. Worldwide, Turkey's tweaks torment tables. Argentina's grabs germinate gutter snipes. Quotidian quagmire, dads biking hours for gigs, mums mending tatters eternally, aspirations archived like dusty comics. Polls pursue praise, Fed fosters futures. When honchos hijack, hopes hype, belief bursts, realms repay relentlessly. Quirky quip, Nixon nagged Fed 160 times in 6 spins. Clinton clocked 6 in 8. Whose watch welcomed wildest whoopee? From Jackson's monster mash to Trump's summoned salvo. Motif marches. Glitzy grabs, grievous gashes. Inflation frolics, orbs ooze, souls squished silly. Fed foes affirm, clumsy coercion courts cataclysm. US tutored through troughs, tempests, hinterland heartbreaks. Yet 2026 frames Powell unbent versus inquests. Markets mighty, yet mistrustful. High Court hassle, January 21. Allies abroad arm. Bolster banks bastion, or bust bounty. Annals alert. Politics pummeling policy, pilfers the pot. But fancy this Fisher fans further. Charter caricatured.